Okay, great.
It's all yours.
Okay, thanks everyone. So today we're going to talk about end user adoption, and we'll get into all the details in just a moment. And I am going to, let's see, I've tried to get all of my screens pulled up, but I have links that I'll be sharing throughout the presentation. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I do consider myself a New Yorker. I lived there longer than anywhere else in my life, and that's predominantly for being, oh, like, hi, Sheila, being the daughter of a Marine. And so I've been a Microsoft partner for over 31 years, a Microsoft MVP for 10 years, a Microsoft certified trainer for 12 years. I did take a hiatus off in the middle. I've co-authored a couple books on business intelligence and Microsoft Dynamics GP. And basically, I love learning. I just love learning. It doesn't matter what it is. My hobbies, and I love learning. So I put my favorite was knitting and crocheting, but if you knit and crochet, you also know that means you're a yarn hoarder as well, and that's part of your hobby too. So, or any of you that happen to be married to someone who knits and crochets, you totally get that as well. Actually, even in foreign countries, okay, I see Kevin nodding like crazy. Even in foreign countries, my husband, I'm telling him, like, let's go find a yarn store. I gotta buy some yarn from here. And he never minds because we end up in a non-tourist area and then we could work our way back. So he never seems to mind. But today we're going to talk about user adoption and end user adoption specifically. And this is my topic of the year. I always have a topic that I'm interested in. I seem to talk a lot about during the year. I also have a passion project from in the MVP space. So, and that one is diversity in technology, where I try to help the world become a little more inclusive in technology when it comes to anyone who's gender marginalized, like women, people of color, and people who have are differently abled. And so, and I have family members that kind of fall in all those categories, obviously women, but like one of the things that's really interesting is my niece is starting college next year, and she was just diagnosed with dyslexia about a year and a half ago. And I've started working with her and using Microsoft Word to help her read things. And that helps her retain a lot because that's something I do. And so anyhow, that's a side note. Okay, so who's this session for? Now, if you look at this screen in the middle, the access going around the clock to share, this is basically steps that happen in the world of Power BI, particularly on the dev and the analyst side of it, or in the data modeling. And I've kind of color coded them with 3 different Power BI roles that kind of fit in. And in your organization, this could actually be a situation where one person is doing all of it, or you may have 10 different people doing it. Doesn't really matter, but this is who this session is for. People who do the dev work, that get the data, clean it up, mash it up, the analysts who explore the data and do the visualizations, and even a little bit with who shares the data. So who is this session about? If that's who it's for that report consumer, that end user. And it's real important that when we're building Power BI, a methodology for organizations, that we build it for everybody in the company. I know right out of college, I was a general manager of a Hampton Inn hotel actually here in Columbia, South Carolina. And we were a business hotel. And so every Friday, we were sold out Sunday through Thursday, but Friday and Saturday, we had like virtually nobody in the hotel. So I would go to the front desk every Friday before I left and say, okay, you could sell a room and negotiate down to X dollars. Then I knew that I was still making money, my occupancy was going up, and our numbers overall looked better. And so I gave them the power to do that. Now that was just one number, so it was easy to put that in their head and make them go, for them to go, oh, totally get this. This is really, I got it. I know what I can negotiate down. And that's actually a tip. If you are on a weekend at a business hotel, you can work on negotiating a rate there. Now, more often than not in businesses, though, there's more than one number that you need to give to those end users, right? Those report consumers, that line level people. So, hi, Mike. And this session is an idea session and not a how-to session. So I want to point that out. So this is a thought-provoking session. So if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat and then we'll address it at the end. I just want to make sure I get through all of my slides. So our agenda is we're going to talk about why user adoption is important, and then why do some people resist? And then I'm going to share with you stories and ideas that can help you with those people that resist, and then we'll open up the floor to Q&A and discussion. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. So why is user adoption important? Well, it's important for all the users to embrace any kind of new technology that's been deployed in the organization, because not only will it help them implement the strategies that you want implemented, it will maximize their productivity, they'll be more engaged, and then the company itself will end up getting a return on investment for the software. So this is true of any kind of software that's out there. You may remember here in 1989, the movie Field of Dreams, and the big thing on that was, if you build it, they will come. That is not true in the world of technology. You could build it all you want, and you're going to have innovators who just cling to you, like we say in the South, like white on rice. But you're going to have resistors as well, and these are people who are going to fight, and then they're going to actively protest and fight the implementation of your Power BI strategy or any software strategy you have, really. So here's my story of when I was a resistor and how I became an Excel champion. So I started in technology a long time ago. I was a Lotus user. I actually used Lotus that looked like this on a computer screen that looked like what you see on the screen. And I love that it's blurry because that just makes it all the more realistic. And when Windows came out and we got Excel in our company, and I see Daryl laughing because you did the same thing. I think, yeah, you worked on the same Lotus. So we got Excel in our company. Now, my business partner at this time was my husband too. So that's kind of interesting. But I knew Excel inside and out. And every time I tried Excel, I don't know, just looked like, oh, too much. It was just change. I just didn't want to deal with it because it was change. Well, I could never remember how to parse a column or do text to columns inside of Excel. And I was struggling again for the umpteenth time to do it. And I thought to myself, this is in the early 90s, probably, I don't know, 94 maybe. And I said, I'm going to try Excel. And I tried Excel. There was text to columns. Boom. That was it. I became an Excel champion. And I dropped Lotus, and Excel was my thing from that point forward. And so that's what we're going to talk about, is people becoming champions. And I'll talk about champions more in just a moment. So before I do that, I'm going to take this link and I'm going to put it in the chat for you guys. Now, what did you write? The only truly useful thing I learned in college way back then. Yeah, I was supposed to do a paper in Lotus Symphony, which was like Office for Lotus. It had a couple of things built in it. And, honest to goodness, it cracks me up now that I think about it. I just ignored it. And I just did the paper manually. I passed, but not with an A, because I didn't use all the tools available. And apparently I wasn't alone. But this is a link that I just provided you to the Microsoft Power Platform adoption site. The reason why I'm guiding you here is, in this gray area, you could download a workbook, which is about an 85-page PowerPoint. Unfortunately, the Power Platform adoption doesn't cover hardly anything in Power BI, but the practices that are involved in here are pretty valuable. So I promise we'll get back to champions in just a minute, but I wanted to share this link with you so you could get some valuable information. And for example, this is some valuable information. It's going to guide you through the whole adoption planning process so that you can make sure that whatever you're implementing when it comes to terms of software is going to benefit from this particular tool. So this is one of my favorite pages. Here is one of the most important pages in that, and it is where you're assembling your team. And it's encouraging you to go ahead and identify the people that you can identify at this point. I would even say identify resistors and identify the people who are on the fence or in the middle. But one of the things that you could identify is a champion. Now, here, if we read it, it says the champion helps evangelize Power Platform, creates a circle of influence, and can feed back to the adoption team what works and what doesn't work. And they will do that. But here's a little bit more information about it. They're going to drive awareness of the whole Power BI. And I got this right from that handout, but I just added Power BI, which was in yellow there. They're going to drive awareness of this whole process throughout your whole organization. And they typically do this outside of their normal job. It is usually not their job. They're just innovators in technology, and they get excited about learning, and they get excited about sharing, and they get excited about whatever makes their job easier. So you want to know who your champions are right away. If we go back to this slide, I mean, look, that is right up there, even before stakeholders on the list, right? Knowing who the champions are, that's quite the big deal. We're not talking about trying to convert executive sponsors. They're the ones that want it in place. They're already sold on it. But if you could get the champion, you're going to be able to use them to your advantage to help you get through on this. Now, can you succeed with a Power BI strategy without champions? You sure can, but it's going to be difficult. So if you cannot identify champions right away, then through some of the nurturing we're going to talk about in this presentation, they should start rising to the top. So that list of who does what, hopefully it'll be a moving list and that you can get involved in it. Now, when I was sharing this with our Saturday group, Kevin is in a Saturday group, as well as Mike, who's on, and Daniel, who's on, and Sheila, who's on, and I'm on it too. Our friend David Prewitt said, "Oh, it's kind of like if the champion starts converting other people, it's kind of like the wave." So yeah, the champion is like that eagle there on the left, and when they're doing the wave, everybody's doing good. But if you don't work it, then the champion is going to be like the guy on the right, all alone, getting laughed at, and nobody is involved in the wave with them. And we need to have that culture or embracing that champion and getting them involved if we want data culture to exist in our own organization. Now, in marketing, I was actually a marketing major in school. There wasn't that much computer offering then, and I learned something called the 3-11 rule. Something good happens, you tell 3 people. Something bad happens, you tell 11. And think about it. Think about like a recent trip to a fast food drive-through. So they left something out of your order. They were rude. You probably went and told on average 11 people. Oh, how did that meant? I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, but that X, they're terrible. They did this. It was terrible. Now, something good happens, you go through there and they say, you know what? You have a longer wait than we think you should have. We're going to give you this coupon for a free breakfast next time you come. Well, you're probably going to be really happy about that, but you're only going to tell about 3 people. So the bad news travels much faster than good news. So if this falls true, then what we need to do is make sure that we have 4 champions for every 1 resistor so that we can at least stay ahead of the game. So think about that. Now, let's talk about why some people resist or dissent. Now, I put this slide in because the next 4 slides literally are coming from that user adoption thing I pointed out. There are just a couple of things I think are important to be part of the conversation. One of them that is that resistance is normal and it is to be expected. So don't go in thinking like, this is really cool, everyone's going to love it, everyone's going to want it, and it's going to be the bee's knees. And that is the 3rd time I've used that today, this many. So yeah, if you're deciding, okay, we have Power BI, so now we're going to incorporate in our Power BI a Power App inside our Power BI, and everyone, or maybe we're going to implement in paginated reports, our paginated visual, and everyone's going to love it. I don't expect everyone to love it. There's going to be some resistance, and it is normal. We need to anticipate that and plan for it right from the very beginning. And the most important way that you can handle resistance is through compassion. Listen, try to understand where they're coming from, and try to understand why they're resisting. And I'll show you um, uh, some things that I've done in the past to make that a little better. And then also make it part of your conversation before you even begin with your executive sponsors. Like, let them know, hey, with all technology uh, what do you call it, projects, there's going to be people resisting. And so just so you know, when someone resists, this is the strategy we're going to take. We're obviously going to try to handle it ourselves. We might come and talk to you about it, but we'll try to handle it all ourselves. And just let them know, hey, that's expected, so that if someone comes back and they hear through the grapevine, oh, so and so, I'm going to pick on someone named let's just say Mary Bob. So it's let me do Jean. That's a gender neutral name. So Jean is bad mouthing everybody, or bad mouthing this project, and is like really hates it. So, and that way it won't be a surprise to the executive sponsor. You'll know that you are dealing with that as part of your strategy, and you suspected that would happen all along. Now, there are, again, in this guide, I'm not going to go through this, but there are a lot of different ways that it will help you with communication with the person who's handling the resistance. So, but I want to point out from that document, common reasons that people resist, and I'm going to address these today. One, people don't have time. People don't know what they want to build. People are not passionate or not warming up to the idea. In other words, they're asking, hey, what's in it for me? People are worried that there will not be sufficient training for new ways of working. That is a big worry. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the next one. People don't like change, period. They just don't like it. They may walk around saying, I know my job. I don't want to learn anything new. I don't want to get involved. You guys all probably know somebody who's like that. Well, one of my favorite business gurus of the 21st century is Simon Sinek. And something he said resonated with me. I've read both of these books. They're wonderful. Value is something people feel, not something we tell them that they get. Now, over my 30-something years in software, I've been told numerous times that people buy benefits. They don't buy features. So you got to remember that. And that's exactly what Simon is saying here is we have to show them it's more than just telling them they have the benefits. We have to show it to them. We have to let them feel it. And one of the ways that I like to do this is by just simply asking them, where do you spend the most time? Let me see if I could make your job easier. I always tell people that. Let me make your job easier. Be selfish. If I can make your job easier, you're going to do it better. If you're doing it better, the company's going to prosper, and it's going to go on from there. So let's pretend we're starting a project together, and these are new end users that are going to be consuming the report. Over on the far left, we have our innovator, and on the far right, we have our dissenter, and then we have everyone else in the middle. So we need to start working on winning over the dissenter and all those people in the middle. So basically, we want to make the blue group our champions and our innovator, because if we can't get through to the dissenter, then at least we'll have some peer pressure going for us. So let's handle the objective of people don't have time. So I was at one of my customer sites back when I had a lot of customers. I only have a handful now. I've made my job role completely different. And I asked this customer, he was dealing with Dynamics GP accounting software. And I said, he probably should have known, because I asked this question every time I go in a customer site. If I could do anything to make your job easier, what would it be besides answer the phone? Now, I always add besides answer the phone because I think it's funny. But also I want them to realize I mean something beyond what they think I can offer them. And he thought about it, and at the end of the meeting, he said, we have a lot of empty batches in our accounting system. Now, empty batches are just where you put records before you commit them to the system or post them, and they do approvals. So I kept digging in, drilling in. Why do you have so many empty batches? And he's like, oh, well, when they come in from the requisition system, it's too hard for me to review and approve all the batches one by one. So I have someone move them all to the same batch, and then we end up with these empty batches. Now, he asked for me to clean up the empty batches, but when I got through listening to him, really listening to what his problem was, I realized that the problem was approving the batches all along. And then he was wasting his AP's person time by moving the transactions to a single batch. So I built him a Power BI report that just looked at all unposted batches at any given point in time. And I don't have the app pulled up because everything was all posted when I pulled it up last. But and then there was an app over here that showed all the batches. So when he finished approving a batch, you could see there are 4 batch IDs on this report. He could just select one and approve it. And then the report would then only show, again, batches that were unposted. So it was easier for him. I made him a report with different views that he could look at things in a batch in different ways, as opposed to GP was written a long time ago. So the only way they could approve batches before was to print a report to this to paper, or print it to a PDF and review it line by line. Now he had a much easier way to do it. So he was doing his job faster. And an interesting thing happened when all he asked for was me to remove empty batches. The controller himself saved 4 hours a week. That's 208 hours a year that I made his job easier. So yes, I converted him. So if we go back to the end users, one of those everybody else's has moved over to the champion side because I just made his job significantly easier. A similar story was someone who was having to manage credit information. So with Power BI, not only was I able to access in the white and in the purple things that are actively in the system. So I'm looking at a sales order that's on hold waiting to be approved. But I went so far as to also go out and evaluate unposted things like that will change. So if we look at the balance for the customer, the posted balance, or the balance in the AR for this customer, was $7,200. But there are $10,000 worth of payments that haven't been committed yet. And then there's some unposted invoices. And here's the credit limit. So if I post those payments and those invoices, then this would be their balance. So it'd be negative, plus the credit limit. So I know their credit limit is about $4,100 or $41,000. So I know I can approve this transaction. So again, this is a Power App that I would be able to click and approve the transaction, offered within Power BI, saving time. Basically, we have to find people's worst itch and scratch it. And yes, Sheila, if you're still on, that's one thing I got from our friend Dan. I love that one. So people also don't know what they want to build. I had a customer, I wished I was lying. They knew that they wanted to give their board of directors visual financial reports. And this was long before Power BI, even the SharePoint version of Power BI. And they literally bought a new server and gave it to me to take back to my office. And I had that server. I would carry it back and forth to their office for 2 years. And I would build different kinds of visuals and different ideas and take it back. And they were always like, oh, no, I don't know. But that's unusual. Now what happens most of the time, because people have seen Power BI, is everybody thinks, I want to build a report. I don't know what I want to build, but I want to build it. And we all know, sitting here, because if you're in a Power BI user group, you've modeled reports before, and you know the complexity involved in getting a good data model, right? If you don't get a great data model, you're going to have a bad experience. And most of the people who think they want to build reports, they don't want to build reports. They just want to be able to create pretty visuals. So my suggestion is using the personalization visual. And so if I were to come in, I should have got this out already. So on here, this is the personalization visual. And if you click on that, it pulls all of this up. So you could change not only the type of visual you're using, but the fields that you want to use. So I strongly recommend that you set up the personalization visual so that end users can create their own reports that they think that's what they're doing, but all they're really doing is using your well-built data model. that's going to make them happy. And if you're not familiar with that, if you go into our options, current file report settings, you could simply turn that on. And with tabular editor 2 or higher, you could even control what they had access to put in the personalizations. Tabular Editor 2 is a freemium version. It's a free version, open source. The other higher versions are a paid for version, so they do a lot more. It's worth getting, but if you want to control what people see, then you'd want to use Tabular Editor. You'd make something called perspectives. You give them the ability to build their own report like that, or just edit the report you've given them, you're bound to move over one more user. Okay, so people are not passionate, they're not warming up to it. Remember I said this was the what's in it for me thing, right? That's that whole conversation that goes on here. Well, let's go back. What's in it for them is value. Now, I already told you the story about how I gave one guy 208 hours a year. I mean, what's that, 4 weeks of vacation time? That's pretty nice, right? And so, again, we need to work on showing some of the benefits. So one of the problems I see people, I hear what they're saying, but not in their words, but by their actions and what they're not saying. There's a lot of people who are afraid of Power BI because they're not analysts. And they don't know how to do analysis. And for that, I say, show them the easy data analysis that we have. This one, the root cause analysis, is the decomposition tree. It is the easiest visual for anybody to use, and it blows people's minds like there's no tomorrow, especially when you point out like this one with this one and this one and this one were all done with, I'm going to manually choose the forecast bias and the demand type and the product type. But this one with the light bulb indicates that that was using artificial intelligence to determine in all of the explain buys what's next. If you show them how to use this and show them how easy it is, they're going to be willing to give it a shot and go for it. So by all means, the key influencer, the decomp tree, all something you want to use. You will get someone in the organization to say, oh, yeah, I can do data analysis now. I could potentially learn something I didn't know. Because we also need to be reminding them, you know, hey, we don't want to build reports to support what we think. We want to build reports that tell us stories about what we don't even know to ask about. And so that's what data analysis can do for you. Another way I like to provide data analysis a lot easier is I will create a whole page on the report with nothing but Q&A visuals. And if someone takes the time to populate each one of these with a Q&A question, either a suggested question or their own question, they will automatically have an interactive experience that was as if they built their own report themselves. And if you do this, don't forget to go in to the Q&A tooling window or into the modeling mode and set your synonyms. In the Q&A tooling, you'll also set all of your suggested questions. Keep in mind, down here, suggested questions. Keep in mind, if you put in one question, you will delete all of the questions that the system will ask you out of the box. You can even define some words that wouldn't necessarily, if someone asks a question and they get an error, like they use the word volume instead of quantity, this is how you could easily teach it. And you could even go in and look to see what people are asking in all the reports for the last 30 days so that you could even set up some new suggestions. That alone, also that Q&A experience, people are very, very comfortable with Bing and with Google. You're going to move someone over into the champion area at that point anyhow. Now, I believe we have, yeah.
So on that previous slide, sorry, I made you move a person back.
That's okay. I'm going to get him. I'll win him back.
You'll get him again.
Yeah.
So with the suggested questions, what I heard you say is as soon as you put one of your own suggested questions in, the automatic generated ones all go away.
Yeah.
So would that be something that maybe you should kind of do last after you review questions that you see coming in or whatever, like if you're not sure?
Yeah, potentially. So like if I wanted to, I'm just going to click on this one, top age groups by total cost, Yeah, I'm gonna use that one. Looks good. Actually, let me put in sales instead of cost. And oop, I don't want buy sales. There. Okay. By sales. Okay. So I've got my top age groups by sales. So if this is a question that I want to add, I'm going to copy that question. And if I go to the tooling, which is this little gear icon on a Q&A visual, if I come in and put in that question and say, yep, that's the question I want to ask. Once I add that and save it, what you're going to see now, I only have one question, and that is, if I look, it is this one. So you want to be careful. Make sure you get all your questions together before you start populating them. But it's easy enough to add any kind of question that you want just by coming in and keep adding them or reviewing questions that have been asked. Like you can see all these questions that have been asked along and along. Maybe this is one. I'm going to top 2 rating by number of sales. Actually, I might want that different. Sales by top 2 rating. Okay, that's not what I want, but we're going to pretend it is. So once I get that in, then I could come in then and add that question in as well and add it in and save it. Now I have 2 questions. And if I want to resort how these appear on the list, because you notice how it did show me just a couple, then you can do that as well. So by all means, take advantage of Q&A. People who are on the fence or afraid about learning or not quite comfortable, they're going to love Q&A because it's just natural questions.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, I would have trouble coming up with all the right suggestions at first. So if you leave it in something and your first set of users are using it, now you can sit there and hone in those questions.
Yeah,
Thanks.
especially if you look at the question list, and it only holds question for 30 days, but it also shows you questions asked in other applications as well, or in other reports as well. So depending on who you're logged in as, you're going to see, these are all today. I don't play, oh yeah, here we go, different data set.
Gotcha.
I don't play around in all these, but yeah, you could get in and do a lot of powerful things. The Q&A is a really powerful benefit. And the nice thing is, so once you click on one of these, you now have an interactive experience going on. So you might as well, I mean, I know that I've just got the same 2 questions, but once you click on these, you end up with this whole interactive experience. So they feel like they've written a report, and they have not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like your little animation of people moving too, by the way.
Yes. Me too. It took me a while to figure that one out, but yeah, that was fun. People are worried that great lead-in, Kevin. People are worried there's not going to be sufficient training for new ways of working. So one of the things I want to talk about is mentoring in your own company. And in the Power BI documentation here, and let me find my, here we go. I'm going to give you this link too on the roadmap and user enablement. This will talk to you about how you can create office hours for mentoring and so forth, even in terms of using like the personalizations or the Q&A. Some people just may want a little bit of guidance to help them along with that. So by all means, do some of that as well. Another thing that we should take advantage of more, whoops, and I just clicked too fast, is the visual called Smart Narratives. Putting it on a page, it'll become interactive. This is, I never thought of it as this until a friend of mine and Kevin's brought it up. This is very much like a newspaper, and it's written on what's on the screen. So as people are not comfortable with analysis, if they click on something, then the smart narrative is going to change and give them words about it. And you could add your own statements on here as well, so that it'll take advantage of those, and it's going to give them text to read, to understand the charts a little bit more. So take advantage of smart narratives. And that mentoring and things like smart narratives, you're going to move somebody else over as well. Another thing you could do to help users is take advantage of bookmarks, tooltips, and actionable buttons. So in this particular case, if you click this button, for example, you get this little pop-up that tells you this visual shows sales by month in the columns and numbers in the of sales in the green line, or whatever you want it to say. That's just one thing you could do to pop it up. And if I were to pull this back up, this was another idea that I thought was really clever, that our friend Dan, if I hover over it, I get a little GIF playing for me. And I have that basically on this page. I set up a tooltip page and just put a GIF on it, and then, or GIF, or however you say it. And now you could put somewhere, maybe on an actionable button, you could call on that and get an explanation on how to use that particular report. But I think that's really powerful. That's something he does. But take advantage of the features that are out there to be able to provide you with certain pieces of information. Again, you're going to end up moving some people over. Now, people say they don't like change, or people don't like change, period. No matter what they say, there's going to be people who just don't like change and just aren't buying in on it. And we had a customer one time, we were implementing a requisition system, and one of the department heads, I mean, this was like one of the top people in the company, he said to us, he goes, we can't do requisitions because we don't know what we're buying or who we're buying it from. Now, they had been doing requisitions completely backwards at that point. They'd been like filling out a PO with no PO number on it. And then after they ordered it and the invoice came in, they'd go to the accounting department and get a PO number. And it was a not-for-profit, and they wanted to really be able to control that better. And so we're like, what do you do? Just randomly call a number on the phone and say, hey, send me stuff? I mean, no, you have an idea. The vendor may change, what you buy may change, the dollar price and the quantity will probably change, but that's okay. You still have an idea of what you need, right? We have to have some idea. And so that kind of resistance is tough. So one example would be for end users, let them work where they're comfortable. If they're work predominantly on a tablet or a phone, let them use the mobile device. Let them use the mobile app from the Microsoft Store for desktop, and look at the screen. It cleans it up a whole lot. Use Power BI apps. That cleans it up as well. If they work in Teams, let them use Power BI reports in Teams. It will seem less daunting because it'll be in an environment that they're already comfortable with. Another thing, we all know there's always at least one Excel genius on staff, right? So let's embrace them. Let's use them to our advantage and turn them into one of those champions. So talk to them and say, hey, look, when I build this data set, you can get your data in Excel and do things in Excel. So they're going to get excited because you're going to start showing them things they probably don't even know about in Query Editor inside of Excel. And then if you do that, that just may end up being the person that will help you verify the numbers are correct, right? And then if they're doing that, they're going to get all cocky and they're going to go like, yeah, I'm still the Excel dude. And they're going to go out and they're going to start spreading the word about Power BI, and they're going to be comfortable with the Power BI data set, and they might end up moving on. And even more important, the company is going to be working with a single source of the truth, which is a nice thing. And I'm not making any statements about COVID one way or the other, nor am I picking on South Carolina, where I live. But this was back in March. We were in the car and my husband said, hey, so obviously it was Tuesday, March 8th. He said, hey, what are the COVID cases now? Because we were talking about them going down. So I took the screenshot on my phone and I pulled it up and I go, 91 new cases. He goes, is that today? And I'm like, no, that's as of March 6th. He goes, was that March 6th? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it's March 6th or month to date for March or year to date. I have no idea. So make sure your reports, the user experience is something worthwhile. This is a book that I was recommended when I was taking a C# class. And this is the only thing I ended up loving and retaining after my C# class. And the book is about the user interface, don't make me think. And I love the attributes here listed on the report. I think these are so valuable for any kind of report, whether it's a web application you're building or a Power BI report. Make it useful, make it learnable, make it memorable, effective, efficient, desirable, and delightful. Don't forget the delightful. And this is, I'm reading what you wrote, Michelle. That's pretty cool. These attributes are important. Make your report something that's learnable and that they feel good going to, right? Oh, it's nice. It gives me good information. So by all means, think about these things. Think about the user experience. Don't think about the UI, the user interface, the way the report looks so much. Think about how the end users are going to experience that report, the UX. That is much more important. When it comes to naming conventions, okay, so here's where I ended up duking it out with some people every now and then. So some of the things we all agree on. The names of all your queries and the names of all your fields need to be logical. They need to make sense to the end user. Like don't let it be ITM ID if you call it clothing ID. Yeah, Mike, me too. Bigger bookshelf. I have to decide for every book. Is this a Kindle book or is this one I go to? Fortunately, I bought the Don't Make Me thing many years ago, and I still pull it out on a regular basis and check some of it out. But make the naming convention something that makes sense to people. One of the things I've started doing recently is I need to change it here. I quit calling my date table a date table. I started calling it a calendar table because it gets confusing to some people when you're trying to get to the date field and it's date.date. So if you say, oh, instead go to the calendar and then get this, right? It's a little bit easier, I think. But make the name something that makes sense. I also say, get rid of any field. If you're not sure if you need a field, get rid of it. Let people ask for it or at least hide it from them. And then I am all about embracing the space. That's like a Belinda thing, embrace the space. I like to put spaces like class space name, department space name. I do that as much for Q&A as I do the users. If you think about that, when I was on the image with the Q&A and in the live report and I wrote by sales and I made it all one word, it got really confused. It didn't recognize what I was looking at. So we want to have spaces and be able to look at that. How about tabs? Okay. I got to stop and digress and tell you a story. So do you remember the TV show Silicon was it Silicon Alley or Valley, with the guys who did the show or did the apps? It was like an
Silicon
HBO
Valley.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Okay, so the lead character went out with this girl who was a coder. And they said, thank you, Sheila. Said, yeah. They're like, what happened? He's like, oh, it didn't work out. And they're like, why? And he's like, because we got an argument as to whether you tab after, a line or tab to indent or or do you put spaces? And so my husband and I, he's a developer, and we were laughing about that later in the car. And I'm like, oh, that's so funny. I said, and how crazy was he to insist on tabs? And then my husband looked at me and said, tabs are better. And then we started having the argument, laughing at them about whether or not you could put spaces. So that cracks me up. But I say embrace the space, put the spaces in. It's not just for the end users, although that's a big part. It also has to do, spaces are not evil, Amon, but it also has to do with, that's right, Sheila. It's not DAX unless it's properly formatted. That's right. But spaces, everything that you do in Power BI, M and DAX can handle spaces. So build the data model for the end users. Don't build them like you're modeling a database. Build them like you're modeling data that's going to be absorbed by end users. Okay. Another thing, again, hide duplicate fields. And this one's a big one. So when you create relationships, I have my fact table down on the bottom and my dimension tables up at the top. Notice how everything that has a link, I hide in the fact table. And again, if you don't do this, you might end up filtering in the wrong place. And if you try to filter in the fact table, it will not propagate that filter back up to the dimension table. So if it's a one-to-many, so you want to make sure you're filtering it in the right spot. So hide those tables. Also over here on the tables here, take advantage of putting in folders to organize your data better. It'll make it easier for the end users to clap up. So like you could put amounts together, you could put geographical or spatial fields together, and putting them in folders far too easy. It's going to make life a whole lot easier for them. I'd rather see it put in a folder in the query that it belongs to than to have a separate query just for measures. That works great for the data modeler way of thinking, the analyst way of thinking, but for end users, it doesn't really make sense. They're going to want to find the field in the query that makes sense to them. I do typically create a measure one for if I'm creating measures for title, like a separate query. If I'm creating measure for titles and things that don't get used by everybody, but maybe somewhere else. But yeah, keep all of that in mind. Okay.
And another thing I would add on that one, Belinda, is if you
Yeah.
could, like if you had a measure for everything that was there and you hit all those columns, which would be great, it's when you have that perfect fact table, then you'll always see that fact table will have a different icon. The fact table itself will have the Sigma icon and especially like in Excel, um, that looks better, right? And Excel will actually do one other thing is if you have measures on a table and also columns that could still be displayed, say off of that fact table, Excel splits them up. So it puts all the measures, you see sales twice
Mm-hmm.
with the measures in the column. So it's a best practice to make everything hidden on that fact table except your measures. And then like you
Yes,
said, put it in folders and
absolutely.
yeah.
And I create a measure for everything that is numerical that could be
Hmm.
summed. So like quantity, this is not normally how I do it. I would have a quantity measure and I hide the original quantity for that very reason for analysis.
Right.
So absolutely, that's an excellent point. Thank you for
Yeah.
bringing
And
that up.
then when the report developers or Excel, those are all sorted to the top. So they're
Mhm.
very easily do. So
Yep. Excellent. Excellent. And that will move our last everybody else over to the champion side. So we still have that
Ooh,
decenter over
wait,
there.
can I guess on that one? Now
Yeah.
that we got the bigger gang all over here, are they going to bull charge the center?
Well, usually what happens is this. So not all these tips are going to work on non-innovators, and they're certainly not going to work on all the dissenters. But hopefully peer pressure and water cooler discussions will at least move them from the dissenter area over to the middle. And if you could at least make that happen where you're not having anybody else complain about it, then that is a giant win. Um, if you have all of these people becoming champions, that dissenter will silence. They will go mute. They might be grumbling the whole time. What's more than likely to happen is they're going to start feeling those benefits and seeing them and seeing what's in it for them. And they're just not going to let anybody know about it for a while until everyone forgets that they were dissenting all along. So that brings me to the end. So we're ready for some Q&A. And wow, I have 10 minutes. All right, that's awesome.
Yeah, you did
So
great.
I
I
saw lots of oh yeah, I heard the
uh,
opposite from another group. What did you hear, Daryl?
a lot of people
I heard
think
that you keep all your measures in the top in one separate
Oh,
folder. That was with
yeah,
a company called, a guy I worked with, Enterprise DNA.
yeah,
Um, and I kind of like it that way myself, but my audience isn't going to be taking my Power BI dashboards and doing anything with them. They're using them to view them and see them. So they're not really going to go in there and look. It's just for me, so I can actually have them in a spot. That's why that's coming from a different direction, I guess.
Yeah, they're not going to see it unless they
As they
come in
develop,
and they try to do a personalization, and then they
right?
go to add a new column. Then they're
They
going
won't
to
be
run
doing that.
into that particular situation. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm saying it's worth thinking about because if they want to build a report, because it's so easy to come in here and say, okay, I don't
Yeah.
want that to be a line and stacked. I want it to be a clustered column chart. And I've got my months there, but you know what? I don't want months. I want instead, maybe I want to go ahead and I like putting in the period, the year and the period. That way I don't have to do a filter on a particular year, right? So now I have that out there. And then I have my total sales and my number of sales. I'm going to get rid of the number of sales, and let me just remove that from.
I just think it's a different audience. That's why I do it the way I do it. Because my audience isn't going to do any of this. They're just going to give me, when I give them a dashboard, they're going to give me what I have a different audience. I'm just telling you, it's from
Yeah,
my
I get that.
experience.
Yeah, I get
I
that.
get it. I get it. I understand it. I have to change everything to do that. Everything's
Yeah.
all done a certain way now.
So if they're doing this, then if they're trying to do their own report, because then they could even bookmark it and save it. If I go to the Q&A here, I'm seeing the Q&A with well, I haven't republished, so that's why they're all showing up here. But I also have a bookmark here. So if I go to Belinda's bookmark, look, I see like all my favorite ones. And now again, I have this interactive experience that I could click on for any of these and see how it works. So on the groups for the measures, it's not wrong either way. You really just have to think about your users. I am not a fan. For a long time, I was a big fan of put all the measures in one place. But when you're really thinking about those end users, it gets a little tough to do that because you're just making it easier on them. I mean, especially if you're thinking about a whole bunch of, I don't want it to sound like I'm degrading anybody's job by any means, but a lot of salespeople, a lot of them are not tech people, right? They are, I stink at sales, so I am in envy of their ability to sell, but they don't love tech like I love tech. They love selling. And so, we've got to make it easy for them. If you're in the hotel business, someone becomes an executive housekeeper, not because they know computers a lot or know how to analyze numbers, but because they know how to get the hotel clean and they know how to manage a staff that gets the hotel clean. And those are very specialized skills. Yep. Wow, I need to spend some time on my Q&A visual. Yeah, Q&A is easy and it's fun, but it's super powerful being able to take advantage of this, right? You always go right back to default right here. And
Oh yeah, I like how you just did it as like a 4-up, and it's like, here, ask 4 different questions.
yeah,
You'll be able to
yeah.
go with that. On the measure group versus non-measure group, another thing that I think helps with it, if you're trying to get to self-service off of a model that you produce, is I have models that have many fact tables, like 3 to 5 different fact tables. And
Mhm.
not every fact table, right? And those are on purpose displayed out for people to analyze in Excel. But not every dimension slices through every fact table. So we put a dictionary out there with basically a Kimball bust matrix
Mhm.
that shows them, here's the fact table and here's the dimensions that influence this fact table. Well, if I put all the measures onto one measure table, they wouldn't have an idea of which ones are going to be influenced by which dimensions, but because they're on that fact table and they can look at that bus matrix, they could say, oh, if I use sales, it's going to be influenced by product and this, that, and the other. But if I use budget might not be influenced by product.
Mhm.
Right. And it's easier communication. So that's another reason why I like, like what Belinda's saying is we put it on the fact table that it makes sense, because we also put that documentation out that helps show how things will be sliced. Otherwise, I get a lot more questions of, why does this always have the same value? So
Yeah.
Your model is a lot more complicated than mine. Then mine's very simple. I'm only like an intermediate, like a junior compared to you guys. So I don't have multiple fat tables. That's why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking, though. Probably.
yeah. And you're probably in I think that's a large percentage of the people doing things, right? There's a lot that just do one fact table.
Well, it's really, so it all evolves for this. You have to think about the end users when you're building reports. Who are these people? What are their, what's going to make their life easier? Just adding a page like this gives them the opportunity to feel like they're building a report. And that's going to make a lot of people happy. Trying to find out what their needs are. You never know what gem someone sitting back in a windowless room in the corner is going to come up with that reveals some amazing insight about the organization. I remember I was dealing with one customer and they were in a very low margin business and they were struggling to stay in business. And they had one outside salesperson and then they had a whole probably like 5 or 6 inside salespeople. And so the owner was, begging me, please help me find something, anything that could help us stay in business. And she was about to let the outside salesperson go. And one of the things that we discovered through insights, which I never really find a lot, just using plain old insights I like the insights in using in clustered column charts, but I don't find a lot on insights. And one of the things that we found was that the outside salesperson far outsold one particular product category over anybody else. So instead of letting that person go, she said, okay, you handle all the sales for this product and you work with all the customers, and everybody else will also work with all the customers selling all of the other products. And sales did go up as a result of that. So the outside, and that was something we would have never thought of. It's like, well, maybe there's maybe they're selling good in a particular area. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to see, but that wasn't something that I normally see. I do like the ones where you could do comparisons here between like this one and this one, and where I can explain the decrease and find out where the difference is specifically. And my favorite one is like I probably grabbed the wrong one. Let me do the find where the distribution is different. No, I'm not going to be able to get the one that I was wanting. They just don't have, I guess there wasn't enough of a difference to show the one I was looking at. But I find these to be kind of fascinating. And again, I picked the same one. Let me do it again. And my little window keeps popping up. Analyze, explain the decrease. Okay. So in here, I'm looking at general sales. No wonder. I was looking for an item in particular to show you my favorite, but I do not see it. I know. Let's do this. Sales by clothing ID by month, by period. Ooh,
Hi, robot.
yeah. Ay. That's too hard to read. By month? No. Okay, let me go back to by period. Really looking for like a clustered column chart, but
when you're done with this part of it, Amin does have his hand up.
oh, okay. Go ahead and ask your question. I'm just getting sidetracked.
Okay. How do I take my hand down? So I guess I have a couple of questions, and you could answer like any of them or none of them. One is like at the start, you have this, it's about adoption and you have this team, right? So what exactly are the goals? Is the goal the technology, or is the goal organizational decision-making, or is the goal profits, or is how do they, because you had in there so I don't know if you want to, I could just answer. Do you want to talk about that or? we could go
Yeah,
on.
so that's a really interesting question, because the goal, I'm going to come back up to an earlier slide where we're talking about assembling the team. The goal of the Power BI methodology in this particular case is not going to come from the work that we're we're going to have an idea of what we want to do, but the executive sponsor and the success owner and these people are going to be the ones that are deciding the goal of the reports. Once we start implementing the reports that they want to achieve, in order to get the goal, to get individual users to get on board with what they're looking at, that's where we have to start going beyond. And that's why we need to have conversations with the executive sponsor and make this all part of our team. Why we need to talk about, okay, part of our adoption plan is getting is this onboarding of employees, and doing it, the onboarding of employees is doing what it takes to get them to get on board, whatever the case may be. So to get them to start using some of these other reports, we might have to build some extra reports for them. We definitely, while we're maintaining the strategy set out for the whole implementation overall, maybe it's just a matter of, in the last example I gave you with the woman who was saying, hey, we're low margin, what can we do to stay in business? I mean, she was just looking for whatever would drive profits. So that was her goal. Like, what can we find? What don't we know? And what areas do we need to focus on, or what areas do we need to stay away from to generate more profits? And so while we're doing that, to get users to look at those reports and use those reports, we're having to employ some other tactics to get them to look at them. Because one of the weird things about Power BI is kind of like a customer management system, our customer relationship management system. There's really nothing to force them to use it. I mean, a bad employee could get away with not looking at it, not using it, and reducing success and of not just the the Power BI project or whatever project you're looking at, but reduce the success of the organization as well. So these are about employing tactics to drive everyone to embrace it, as opposed to grudgingly going toward it or resisting it flat out altogether. Because I have seen in 30-something years, I have seen dissenters, if you don't handle them right, take a whole project down. And it's not to the betterment of the company, but sometimes you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So that's a really good question. But it's not, this is about, okay, so we're assuming we've met with our sponsors and they've told us what it is they want to achieve, or what their initial goal is to achieve in the realm of Power BI or whatever technology is. So we're building that data model and we're doing it. Now, how do we get people to flock to it? How do we get them to come to it? I mean, what do we use as a light to drive these moths to us? So these are the things that we do to employ that. So we have to make them feel value. And oddly enough, sometimes something small and simple you could do, honestly, that one report that I showed you that saved the guy 200 hours a year, that was a report that took me, I don't know, probably about 30-45 minutes to build. And it saved him 200 hours a week. I mean, it's a simple report. I just went into SQL and dug. Even without the putting in this would have been done in just probably 20 minutes. If the bulk of it was spent building an app that would automatically do it for them, approve it for them. But tons of time saved just by doing something that will make that controller want to embrace Power BI more and start checking out other things in Power BI more. So,
Thanks very much. I see Daryl had a question in the chat.
You can speak to it if you want.
yeah.
I was just messing around with that quick Q&A thing, because I thought it was kind of fun. I was dropping stuff in. It said the owner doesn't allow me to do the Q&A visual, and I went, I'm not the owner of this particular data set. I know somebody who is. So I emailed them now, and I wanted to know, how do you get give me access, because I went dragged to the Q&A and it said, the owner doesn't allow access to Q&A. What would cause that?
Yeah, I think you can in the options and settings. I'm thinking you could turn off Q&A in
Let's do that
here somewhere. Either in here or in data load. Yeah, here.
Yeah, there it is.
On. Yeah. So that's all they have to do is to be able to turn it on.
Yeah.
And then you could even set it up to share synonyms. Now, synonym with everyone. Synonyms not only work through the Q&A tooling, but if you go to the modeling folder, and let's say we opened up sales and we select the quantity field. Here is also synonyms for quantity. So I could change this to include the word volume. Or
cheddar.
What was it?
I said cheddar. I don't know.
Cheddar?
Cheddar.
That's common for us, quantity and volume. Anyway.
You know what? I will come to total sales and I will make total sales cheddar. Okay. So now if we came into Q&A, we could change that to cheddar and volume. And now I'm going to even go in. Oh, that didn't pick up the volume, or I misspelled it, for one of my rating types, which is meh. So not only can I go into did I get that right? Yeah. Let's see. Why did that not define? Let's come in, check out synonyms, or actually I'll do teach here. I'm going to grab volume. And that should have been sales. I don't know why that didn't. Oh, because I did total sales. Maybe, I don't know. Save. There we go. So it will not only look at queries, total queries. It'll also look at value or fields in the query and values. So I could, if I came in and said, okay, let me go to my items. One of my divisions is swimwear, swim. Okay. So if I came in and changed this to swim, and it knows, hey, swim is a class name. I came in, it should basically there. That's my class name. So it picked up on that as well. So you could get to a lot of information. This is really a great way for people to feel like they're building something. And if they get something they really like, they can pin it down and make it a permanent report, including in the cloud. They could do that. So if this is what I like, I can, oh, I thought I could pin that down in the cloud. I guess I can't. More options. But I can change the visualization from a Q&A to something else. So maybe I come in and look at it like that. There we go. I'm digging that. And now I probably can do my analysis that I was looking for. Anyhow, but there's a lot to be found right on the screen. And just paying attention and thinking, show me the money. But yeah, so just thinking about the end users and trying to make life easier for them. What's going to make it better? Help them adopt. If you do that, you're going to end up being the hero for the whole implementation. So why wouldn't you want to do it? Any final thoughts?
Can we see the people dance? Sorry.
I don't know that I have them dancing, but I don't think they dance. They move.
That was a great. That's a great technique.
Thanks. Well, it's just something that we all need to be thinking about when we're building out reports, because there really is nothing to make people use them. And we want everybody using them because we know it can make their businesses better. It can make them much more competitive, it can make them more profitable, it can make individuals more successful. I mean, we know that, and we just have to convince them to do it. Not everyone is going to be an innovator like us. Not everybody spends their time coming to user group meetings. So, yeah. Okay, Mr.
Well, great.
MVP, I'm
Well,
done.
thank you so much. Let me turn off the recording.